He was humiliated, beaten, left for dead in a dark alley while the people who were supposed to respect him laughed in his face. But Steven Seagal wasn't just any man. He had a fire burning inside that no punch, no insult, no failure could ever extinguish. The night he fell, he swore to himself, he would rise. Not just rise, but rise stronger, sharper, faster. The men who hurt him, who laughed at his weakness, they would soon realize a truth they would never forget. Some men aren't just warriors, they are legends in the making. The road to that legend began in the most unlikely place, a small, mist-covered mountain village, where rumors spoke of a kung fu master whose skills were unmatched and whose discipline could transform even the weakest into a weapon. Many had tried to learn from him, but most failed. Most returned broken, defeated, and humbled. Seagal arrived at dawn, his clothes torn, his body aching, but his eyes blazing with determination. The villagers watched in silence as he approached the master's temple. The master's eyes, sharp and piercing like a hawk's, studied him for a long moment. "You seek revenge," he said, his voice calm, yet filled with authority. "But before you strike, you must first learn patience, control, and the power of enduring pain." At first, Seagal laughed. "I don't need patience. I need action." But the master shook his head. "Patience is the greatest weapon. Without it, anger will destroy you before you destroy your enemy." And so, the journey began. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. The training was brutal, relentless. Every strike the master delivered was precise, painful, yet a lesson in disguise. Every moment of exhaustion, every bruise and cut, forged not just his body but his mind. The man who arrived desperate for revenge was slowly transforming into something more dangerous, more unstoppable. By nightfall, under the silver glow of the moon, Seagal would meditate in silence, letting the pain of the day sink deep into his bones, sharpening his focus, his reflexes, and his will. He was no longer just a man hurt by the world. He was a man who was learning the art of becoming unbreakable. And the day would come, the day when he would take back everything that was stolen from him. The day the world would witness the rise of a true legend. Before we continue, comment below if you're ready to watch a man endure pain and rise stronger than ever. After the humiliation, after the beating, Steven Seagal found himself standing at the base of a mist-covered mountain. The village before him was small, almost forgotten by time. Wooden houses with curved, tiled roofs lined narrow paths, and the air smelled of damp earth and incense. Somewhere, a bell rang slowly, resonating across the silent hills. This was the place he had been told could make a man into something more than human, a place where pain became power and patience became strength. He walked through the village, drawing curious glances from the few villagers who dared to look at the stranger. His clothes were tattered, and bruises marred his face, but his posture was upright, and his eyes burned with determination. Steven knew one thing: this was his only chance. If he failed here, there would be no coming back. At the top of the mountain stood the master's temple, a simple wooden structure with faded red paint and carvings of dragons etched into its beams. The doors were massive, and the silence that greeted him felt almost alive. He approached, and an old man appeared. The master's hair was white as snow, his face lined with decades of discipline, yet his eyes were sharp, piercing, and alive with a quiet fire. "You are here for revenge," the master said, his voice calm but commanding, echoing through the courtyard. "But revenge is not won through anger. It is earned through control, endurance, and understanding." Steven clenched his fists. "I don't need lessons. I need to get stronger. I need to strike back." The master shook his head slowly. "Strength without discipline is a blade that cuts its wielder first. You must learn patience, humility, and how to endure pain without letting it break you." And with that, the training began. The first day was simple: move like water, breathe like the wind, meditate under the sun. But by the second day, the pain became unbearable. Every strike from the master's staff hurt like fire, every push-up on the rough stone floor made his muscles scream, every fall onto the wooden boards of the courtyard left bruises that throbbed for days. The villagers watched silently, knowing that few men could endure even an hour of this training. Weeks passed, and the routine intensified. Dawn broke with the sound of metal clashing against wood as Steven practiced defensive stances. His body ached constantly, but he learned to embrace the pain, to let it sharpen him. The master's voice was always there, a constant guide. Pain is not your enemy. Fear is. Anger is. Let them flow through you, then channel them into action. The nights were even harsher. The master would have Stephen meditate under the stars, cold wind whipping at his skin, muscles trembling with exhaustion. Sometimes he would have to balance on a single leg atop jagged stones, arms outstretched for hours, until the cold and fatigue blurred his vision. But the master never allowed excuses. You think a fight will be easy? If you cannot endure this, you will break when true danger comes. Slowly, transformation began. The man who had entered the village bruised, broken, and full of rage was now a creature of discipline and focus. His reflexes became lightning fast. His strikes became precise, sharp, and devastating. And most importantly, his mind was calm, unshakable, and ready to calculate his revenge. During breaks, the villagers would approach him quietly. "Why do you endure so much?" one asked. Stephen smiled faintly, wiping blood from a fresh cut. "Because pain is temporary. Strength is forever." Even the master was beginning to show signs of approval. He would watch Stephen spar with bamboo poles or practice striking wooden dummies with intense focus, a faint nod acknowledging progress. "You learn quickly," he admitted once. "But remember, the true battle is not with others. It is with yourself. Control your fear, your anger, and you will become unstoppable." Months passed. Days blended into nights. The mountain winds howled, the sun beat down relentlessly, and Stephen endured every trial. By now, he was no longer the desperate man who had arrived. He was a weapon, forged in pain, sharpened by discipline, and guided by the wisdom of the master. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting blood-red light across the courtyard, Stephen stood at the edge of the mountain, gazing down at the village far below. He clenched his fists, feeling every bruise, every scar, every lesson learned. He could almost taste the moment of revenge, when those who had humiliated him would realize that the man they thought weak had become unstoppable. The master approached, silent as a shadow. "Tomorrow," he said simply, "you will begin the next phase. Your body is ready. Your mind, almost. But remember, the moment you fight, you must remain calm. A true legend does not let anger guide him. He lets precision and patience lead." Stephen nodded. For the first time in months, a smile touched his face, not from joy, but from anticipation. He had endured pain, learned discipline, and mastered his body and mind. The world that had once mocked him would soon learn a hard lesson. Steven Seagal had risen, stronger than ever. Comment below. Would you survive the master's training? Who else could endure this? The air in the village was thick with mist as Steven Seagal descended from the mountains. His body, once battered and broken, now moved with precision and purpose. Every step was deliberate, every motion calculated. Months of relentless training had sharpened him, not just physically, but mentally. The fire that had been lit in him that night, he was humiliated, had grown into a controlled, burning storm. He arrived in the city at dusk. The streets were quiet, the kind of silence that makes even the bravest hearts uneasy. Stephen's enemies had no idea he was coming, and that ignorance would be their first mistake. The first target was a man named Kuro, the ringleader who had orchestrated his earlier defeat. Kuro lounged in a private dojo, surrounded by his bodyguards, mocking Seagal even in absentia. "He's gone," Kuro laughed to his henchmen. Once that pathetic man hit rock bottom, he'd stay there. But rock bottom is where legends are forged. Stephen entered silently through the shadows, his presence unnoticed. He could hear Kuro's laughter echoing through the wooden beams of the dojo. The moment was perfect. He stepped into the light. Silence. Every henchman froze. Kuro turned, eyes widening as recognition struck. "Seagal," he whispered, but the word carried fear. Seagal's face was calm, expression unreadable. "You thought I was weak. You thought I was finished. You were wrong." Without another word, the first attack came. Kuro lunged, but Stephen's reflexes were lightning fast. He sidestepped, using the attacker's momentum to send him crashing into a wooden pillar. One by one, the bodyguards charged, weapons raised, but Stephen moved with grace and precision. Each strike was measured, efficient, and devastating. His hands and feet were extensions of the discipline and mastery he had learned from the master on the mountain. One guard rushed with a knife. Stephen deflected it with a swift block, twisting the man's wrist until he dropped the weapon, then delivered a precise strike that left him unconscious. Another charged with a bat, only to be met with a spinning kick that sent him sprawling across the floor. There was no panic, no rage-fueled aggression, only controlled, calculated power. Kuro stumbled back, panic overtaking arrogance. "You how?" he stammered. "I thought I destroyed you." Stephen's voice was low and steady. "You only made me stronger. Every insult, every blow, every moment of humiliation, it forged me into this." The fight intensified. Kuro tried to escape, but Stephen anticipated every move, predicting his actions as if he could see the future. The henchmen fell one by one, some pleading, some trying to fight. All failed. Every strike was a lesson, every maneuver a demonstration of discipline turned into lethal precision. Amid the chaos, Kuro finally lunged, desperate, wielding a heavy metal rod. Seagal caught it mid-swing, twisting it from his hands and sending him crashing to the floor. The ringleader was finally on his knees, fear etched deep into his face. He looked up at the calm figure of Seagal towering over him. This isn't just fighting," Kuro gasped. This is something else." "Who taught you?" Seagal's expression remained calm, almost serene. "I learned from a master," he said simply. "But the greatest teacher was every moment you thought you could break me." The silence that followed was thick. Every man in the room could feel the difference now, not just in Seagal's skill, but in his presence. He radiated control, power, and inevitability. He was no longer the man who had stumbled into humiliation months ago. He was something more, an unstoppable force, a shadow that carried justice with every movement. And yet, even as the fight ended, Seagal did not gloat. He did not deliver unnecessary blows. He simply stood, letting the defeated kneel and breathe, a quiet lesson in restraint accompanying the fear he had instilled. Revenge was not just about pain, it was about justice, precision, and making the guilty understand the consequences of their arrogance. Outside, the city lights flickered. Somewhere, someone whispered the rumors of the man who had returned, a man once defeated, now a true legend. They would tell the story for years, of the quiet fighter who endured months of unimaginable pain, who mastered his body and mind, and who returned not as a victim, but as a force of inevitable justice. Seagal left the dojo silently, as he had entered. His first strike had been made. But the war was not yet over. The world that had mocked him would soon see that the man they thought broken was unbreakable. And every next encounter would only further cement his legend. Comment below if you think Seagal's patience and discipline are stronger than raw anger. Who else would survive this level of training and fight? The city never sleeps, but that night, something had shifted. A hush fell over the streets as word spread about what had happened at Kuro's dojo. Whispers carried from alleyways to rooftops, "Seagal has returned, and he's not the same man." Every criminal, every thug, every man who had once crossed him felt it. Fear. The kind that gnaws at the gut, that twists the stomach, that keeps you awake long after the danger seems gone. They had mocked him, humiliated him, and thought him finished. Now they realized the truth. He had become a force that could not be reckoned with, a storm that struck silently and with precision. Inside the dojo, the defeated men trembled. Some were bruised, some broken, and all were terrified. Kuro, the ringleader, stared at the floor, unable to look at Seagal's calm, imposing figure. He felt shame and terror mingled into a single sharp ache. Every insult he had hurled, every cruel laugh, every act of arrogance, it all came back to him now, amplified by the undeniable skill and quiet power standing before him. Seagal's presence was unlike anything they had seen. He did not shout, he did not boast. He simply stood there, every movement precise, every breath controlled, radiating calm confidence. That was the most terrifying part. He wasn't angry. He wasn't frenzied. He was in control. Every man knew that if he chose to strike again, none would survive. By morning, rumors had spread beyond the dojo. Market vendors whispered in fear as Seagal passed by, children watched in awe, and even the city guards who had previously ignored him felt a chill at the thought of crossing his path. The name, Steven Seagal, had shifted from actor and martial artist to something more, an almost mythical figure, a shadow of retribution that could appear anywhere, anytime. Kuro's underlings tried to regroup, but panic had taken hold. Plans for retaliation faltered under the weight of their fear. Even the strongest among them hesitated, thinking of the precision, speed, and unrelenting discipline Seagal had displayed. They had learned a hard lesson. Brute strength and numbers mean nothing against someone who has mastered both mind and body. Seagal, however, did not revel in fear. He moved through the city quietly, observing the results of his first strike. He saw the trembling hands of thugs, the anxious glances of men who had once thought him powerless. He walked past them without a word, but each footstep carried a message. Revenge is not about anger. It is about inevitability. In the shadows of a narrow alley, a young boy peeked from behind a crate. Is that Steven Seagal?" he whispered. His father, a small merchant, nodded. "Yes." He came back stronger, and everyone who wronged him now knows the price. The boy's eyes widened, a mix of fear and admiration lighting his face. News of the encounter reached Kuro's higher-ups. Panic meetings were called. Guards were doubled, weapons readied, and strategies whispered in hushed tones. But deep down, they all knew the same truth. The man they had humiliated was no longer a man. They could not predict him, they could not control him, and they certainly could not stop him. He had become a legend. Even those who had never met Seagal began to feel the ripple of his presence. Stories spread like wildfire. The precise strikes, the calm demeanor, the unstoppable power. People said he moved like a shadow, struck like lightning, and punished only those who deserved it. Fear mingled with awe, and soon, everyone knew to respect the name, even from a distance. Meanwhile, Seagal himself remained focused. He did not let the whispers, the fear, or the admiration distract him. He had one goal: complete justice. Every step was calculated, every move planned. He would continue to strike, not out of vengeance alone, but as a lesson. Strength without discipline is meaningless, but strength with mastery can change the course of any story. By nightfall, the city had transformed. Silence hung over streets that were once filled with arrogance and crime. Seagal's first strike had done more than defeat enemies. It had reshaped the environment itself. Fear, respect, and awe had replaced mockery and arrogance. And somewhere, deep in the shadows, he prepared for the next confrontation. The legend had begun, and the world had no idea what was coming next. Comment below. Would you survive facing someone like Seagal after months of rigorous training? Who else deserves to learn the power of patience and discipline? The dawn broke over the city like a curtain rising on a stage. But this was no ordinary morning. Word had spread of Steven Seagal's return, and the fear that gripped the streets was palpable. Every corner, every alley, every shadow seemed to whisper his name. By now, no criminal, no thug, no man who had once thought himself untouchable dared move without caution. At the heart of the city, Kuro and his remaining lieutenants convened in a heavily guarded penthouse. Their faces were pale, their hands shaking as they pored over maps and strategies. "We underestimated him," Kuro admitted, voice trembling. "We humiliated him, and now he's become something else entirely." The room fell silent. One of the lieutenants spoke cautiously. "He moves like a ghost, strikes without warning. Our men don't even see him coming." "Yes," Kuro said bitterly. "And if we don't act fast, we will all pay the price. He's not just seeking revenge, he's delivering a lesson, and none of us are exempt." Meanwhile, Seagal was already in motion. He had no guards, no weapons but his own mastery, yet every step radiated silent authority. His eyes scanned the city, noting escape routes, weak points, and the movements of his enemies. He didn't strike blindly. He was a surgeon with a mission, each action precise, each decision deliberate. The first encounter came in an abandoned warehouse at the docks. Kuro's men had gathered there, hoping to regroup and plan their next move. But they had underestimated him. A single shadow appeared at the doorway: Steven Seagal. No one noticed him until it was too late. He struck silently. A swift kick to the first thug sent him crashing into crates. Another lunged with a pipe, only to be caught mid-swing, flipped over, and incapacitated before he even realized he was in danger. The fight was brutal but calculated. Seagal did not attack recklessly. Every movement was designed to neutralize threats efficiently while conserving his energy for the inevitable confrontation with Kuro himself. Kuro, watching from a balcony above, felt a chill run down his spine. "He's unstoppable," he muttered, gripping the railing. From above, he could see his men falling one by one. Panic spread faster than the fight itself. Fear gripped their hearts, and their coordination crumbled. Finally, Seagal stood alone in the center of the warehouse. The dust hung in the air like fog, illuminated by the dim light filtering through broken windows. Kuro descended the stairs, hands trembling, eyes wide with terror. You think you can take us all?" he stammered. Seagal's voice was calm, controlled. "I don't think. I act. Every strike, every move, it has purpose. And you will learn the cost of arrogance." Kuro charged, desperate, swinging wildly. But Seagal's training had honed him beyond human limits. Every strike was anticipated, every motion countered with precision. One by one, Kuro's attempts failed. He was thrown to the ground, overpowered, and finally pinned by Seagal's controlled strength. The warehouse fell silent, except for Kuro's ragged breathing. Steven stepped back, allowing the man to see the consequences of his choices. "This isn't personal," Seagal said. "It's justice. You humiliated others, thought yourself untouchable, and now you've met the cost of underestimating a man who mastered patience and discipline." Outside, the city had gathered in whispers. Word of the confrontation had spread, and people dared to peek from behind corners. They saw the legend in motion, unshakable, precise, and calm. No fury, no hatred, only disciplined power. Some whispered in awe, others prayed they would never face him. Kuro, finally understanding the depth of his failure, looked up at Seagal. I thought you were weak." "I was wrong," he admitted, trembling. Seagal's eyes softened slightly, just enough to show he was not a monster. "You were not wrong to fear me. You were wrong to underestimate the power of discipline, patience, and mastery. This is your lesson." The defeated men lay on the ground, exhausted, broken, but alive. Seagal had struck, yes, but he had not killed unnecessarily. He had delivered justice, not rage. And in that moment, the legend of Steven Seagal grew, not just as a fighter, but as a man whose patience, skill, and endurance made him unstoppable. The city would never forget that day. The whispers became stories, the stories became legends. Everyone who had ever mocked or underestimated him now knew the truth. A man who endured months of pain, who mastered his body and mind, and who approached revenge with discipline rather than fury, could not be defeated. And somewhere in the shadows, Seagal turned, walking away silently. He left behind fear, awe, and a lesson that would echo for generations. True strength is earned, not inherited. True revenge is not anger, it is mastery. Comment below. Would you face a man who mastered patience, discipline, and kung fu to the point of legend? Who else deserves a lesson like this? The warehouse was silent, the dust settling like a soft blanket over the broken remnants of Kuro's ambition. One by one, Steven Seagal's enemies rose from the ground, bruised and exhausted. They had survived, but the fear in their eyes was unmistakable. Every man in that room now understood what they had underestimated. The man who had been humiliated and left for dead months ago was no longer merely human. He was a legend. Seagal's gaze swept over them. Calm. Precise. There was no rage, no desire to humiliate further, only a quiet authority that demanded respect. "Enough," he said softly, his voice carrying weight without shouting. "You've seen the cost of arrogance. You've learned that strength without discipline is meaningless. You may live, but only if you remember this lesson for the rest of your lives." Kuro, trembling on the floor, nodded furiously. I understand, sir. I will never forget. I misjudged you." "You did," Seagal said simply. "But now you have a choice. Learn from this, or continue down the path that brought you here. The next time, I will not show mercy." The defeated men remained silent, each lost in the reality of what they had faced. Pain had been returned tenfold, but not blindly. It had been precise, controlled, and purposeful, the hallmark of someone who had endured months of relentless training and emerged disciplined and unstoppable. Seagal turned to the only man in the room who had acted with restraint, A young lieutenant who had hesitated, kept his distance, and shown respect even under pressure. "You," Seagal said, nodding. "Your loyalty and sense of discipline are rare. Stand with me. Help me ensure that what happened here never happens again. You have potential. I will guide it." The young man's eyes widened. "Sir, I won't fail you," he whispered. "I know," Seagal replied, his calm intensity filling the room. "Your training begins now. The rest of you, leave, and remember everything you've learned tonight." Outside the warehouse, the city had begun to stir. Word had spread of what transpired inside, and the people were whispering in awe. They spoke not just of Seagal's strength, but of the way he delivered justice. He did not kill unnecessarily. He did not strike out of anger. Every move, every strike, every decision was calculated. Fear and respect had replaced arrogance and mockery, and the city now knew a true master's power was silent, precise, and inevitable. Seagal walked through the dimly lit streets, his figure calm and composed. People stepped aside instinctively, giving him space. Some dared to peek, whispering in reverence, while others simply watched, knowing they were witnessing something legendary. He moved with the confidence of a man who had faced the deepest pain, endured months of brutal training, and emerged unbreakable. In a quiet alley, he paused, looking at his own reflection in a puddle of water. Bruises still marred his skin, and scars remained as reminders of the journey he had endured. But the reflection staring back at him was not just of a fighter, it was of a man tempered by discipline, patience, and mastery. Every line, every mark, every wound told a story of endurance, of control, and of triumph over those who had underestimated him. He had achieved revenge, yes, but it was not the chaotic, rage-filled vengeance some might have expected. This was precise, calculated, and meaningful. Every action had a purpose, and every opponent had been given a lesson they would never forget. Returning to the mountain village where his master awaited, Seagal bowed deeply to the man who had guided him. "I have done as you taught me," he said. "I have delivered justice, controlled my anger, and mastered both my body and mind." The master's eyes twinkled. "You have surpassed even my expectations. Remember this, true strength is not in defeating others. True strength is in controlling yourself. You have done both, and now, you are a legend." Seagal nodded, understanding the deeper truth. His journey of pain, training, and revenge had not been just about punishing those who wronged him. It had been about mastering himself, finding discipline in chaos, and earning the respect of all who witnessed his rise. As he walked down the mountain path, the sun broke over the horizon, bathing the valley in gold. The city below would never forget the day a man who had been humiliated returned, endured unimaginable trials, and became a force no one could challenge. The whispers of his legend would grow louder with each passing day, a story of patience, discipline, and ultimate mastery. And for Steven Seagal, the path forward was clear. The world had learned the cost of arrogance. Those who respected discipline would thrive, those who underestimated it would falter. The balance had been restored, and the legend had been cemented, not through rage, not through chaos, but through mastery, control, and the power of enduring pain to achieve true justice. Comment below. Do you think discipline and patience are stronger than raw anger? Would you follow a master like Seagal to learn true power? The city had returned to its normal rhythm, but the echoes of what had happened could not be erased. Even as life went on, every street corner, every alley, and every whisper carried the story of a man who had once been humiliated, left broken, and underestimated, and had returned not just to take revenge, but to teach a lesson the world would never forget. Steven Seagal walked through the streets at dawn, calm and composed. The city had witnessed his power, but it had also witnessed his restraint. He did not strike blindly, he did not humiliate unnecessarily, and he did not act out of anger. Every move had been precise, every strike purposeful. Every opponent had been given a chance to understand the cost of arrogance, and yet Seagal had left alive those who had learned. That was the mark of a true master. He paused at the edge of a quiet park, looking at the first light of the sun reflecting off the buildings. Children played nearby, oblivious to the legend walking among them. Merchants set up their stalls, and the streets slowly filled with life again. The city had changed, not because of fear alone, but because of respect. People had learned that true power is not loud, not chaotic, not vengeful in a careless way. True power is silent, deliberate, and disciplined. Seagal's thoughts drifted to his master in the mountain village. The man who had taught him the ways of kung fu, the lessons of patience, discipline, and endurance, had shown him that strength is only meaningful when controlled. That lesson had guided every strike, every confrontation, every decision. And now, the world had witnessed the result, a man transformed from victim to legend, whose mastery was undeniable. The people who had once mocked or harmed him would carry the lesson forever. They had learned that arrogance and cruelty could be punished, but not through mindless rage. Punishment, justice, and revenge, all carried weight when tempered by wisdom and control. Those who respected strength learned from it. Those who did not were reminded that underestimating someone with discipline and skill can be catastrophic. Seagal's journey had been painful. Months of relentless training, endless bruises, sleepless nights meditating under the cold mountain sky. Each moment had tested him, broken him, and rebuilt him stronger. Pain had become a teacher, fear a tool, and patience a weapon. He had endured everything to emerge not only victorious but transformed. Now, as he walked through the city streets, he saw the ripple effects. The defeated criminals had vanished, replaced by a cautious respect for those around them. People whispered stories of the legend who had returned, someone who had mastered his body and mind, endured humiliation, and emerged stronger than any enemy. Even strangers in the city now knew the name Steven Seagal, and it carried weight far beyond any fame he had previously held. He stopped at a small alleyway where a young man nervously approached. "Sir, I heard what you did. I've never seen anyone like you. How did you become so strong?" Seagal looked at him, calm and measured. Strength is not just about fighting. Strength is about enduring pain, controlling yourself, and learning from every hardship. If you master yourself first, nothing in the world can defeat you. The young man nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "So, it's not about anger." "Anger is easy," Seagal replied. "It is weak men who fight with anger. True power is silent. True respect is earned. Control yourself, master your body and mind, and the world will follow your lead, not the other way around." As he walked away, the city seemed to hold its breath. He had given justice, taught lessons, and left an indelible mark on everyone who had witnessed him. The man who had been humiliated and broken was now a figure of awe, respect, and legend. Even the master in the mountains would have smiled. The student had learned well. He had endured pain, mastered discipline, and delivered precise, controlled justice. He had taken revenge, yes, but he had also become a teacher in his own right, a living example that strength without discipline is meaningless, and that patience and control are the ultimate weapons. And the moral was clear, for everyone who would listen: respect is not given because of wealth, fame, or fear. Respect is given because of discipline, courage, and humility. True power lies not in striking first or striking hard, but in knowing when to act, how to act, and why. The world had learned this lesson from Steven Seagal, the man who had endured pain to become a legend. As he disappeared into the rising sun, the city below whispered his name like a promise that arrogance would be punished, that strength must be tempered with control, and that a true master leaves a legacy far beyond the fight itself. Type legend in the comments if you believe discipline and patience are the real paths to power. Tell me, who inspires you to endure hardship and master yourself?